I don't know. I've known Carolyn now for 7 years,
Okay.
and I've been researching mediumship for 35 years since I was a talk show producer at ABC in the 80s during the New Age channeling boom.
Hmm.
And I've been studying it for a long time. And there is a mediumship boom underway right now. And I just stumbled across her on Facebook, and I ran a story behind her. She was running a contest, enter your name for a chance of a free reading. Well, I've been read to death that I don't need another reading. Let me tell you a little story, a little episode from another medium I taped over a span of 9 years. And she said, that's the most incredible story I've ever heard online. And that's saying a lot. I've been a full-time medium for all these years. So that was the beginning of our friendship, because she she chimed in on that story and how bizarre it was. Even though it was
Hmm.
true, it was still really bizarre. So anyway, I started researching her and following her. What I didn't expect from researching and befriending Carolyn Clapper is Carolyn Clapper saved my life twice. The first time, she woke up crying and called me saying, you got to go to the ER right now or you're going to be dead in 3 days. And
Wow.
what had happened was I nicked my wrist with the rusty edge of a snowboard I was carrying, and the area of my wrist where that nick was became inflamed and red. And then my hand swelled up. And I hear her reading me medically on the other side of the country, saying it's something about the blood, meaning a blood clot could form. So I go to the ER. I hold my hand up to the nurses on the other side of the plexi, and they go, yeah, get in here right now.
Oh, wow.
And then she says, what did they give you? They gave me 10 days of antibiotics. And she goes, no, they're telling me 14 days. You got to go back in there. You got to tell them you need 14 days, not 10, because her 5 doctors in spirit are telling her it's 14 days, not 10. So I made up a story about losing my prescription, and they gave me another 7 days. So there we were.
Oh, wow.
The second time happened week before last, and I had helped the grandchildren of a good friend of mine had contacted some kind of intestinal flu that's common amongst young children, and all these grandchildren were like 5 through 7. And grandma calls me and says, can you come up and watch 2 of the kids while I take one of the kids to the hospital? She's looking really weak. And I rush up there, and she takes the child in and gets her on an IV, 2 IVs. And a week and a half later, I get this bug and it dehydrates me. But I'd never been dehydrated before from any kind of intestinal or any other kind of bug. And Carolyn was picking up on me from Wisconsin and going crazy because I didn't have my phone by me, and she could see where I was. And apparently, this flu bug creates dehydration. And I was drinking the wrong thing, drinking like peach iced tea, which is like a diuretic
Yeah.
and doesn't I should have been drinking sports drinks and whatnot, coconut water. At any rate, she can't reach me by my phone. And she calls a buddy who I'm supposed to go pick up at the airport. She calls him and says, you got to take an Uber. And when you get there, you got to call an ambulance. He goes, well, I just talked to him. He said he was on Laurel Canyon. He's not on Laurel Canyon. He's on the floor of your apartment. You got to call an ambulance as soon as you get there. And he argues with her because he's not that receptive to this stuff,
Right.
even though she brought through the donor of his heart and liver. And so when he gets there, realizing everything she said was true, she calls the ambulance. They get me into the ER. They get me on IVs. I'm so out of it that I wasn't compos mentis for like a couple of days. I was delusional about what's going on. And he told the doctors that Carolyn was my sister.
Oh.
And Carolyn gets on the phone with this nurse and says, I understand what I'm seeing is that the toxins cross the blood-brain barrier, and that's when they become delusional. And the nurse goes, yes, that's exactly what happens. And then finally she levels with her, says, look, I'm a medium.
Mm-hmm.
And I can see these things. And the nurse, because she's out here in California, she goes, that's so cool.
No.
And Carolyn says, I got to move to California. So it was pretty wild. She's my guardian angel twice. Pretty dramatic. But I've been following her readings for 7 years now. The stories are so amazing that if you don't know anything about mediumship, for a lot of the lay public, it's going to be over the top. The bottom line is, in my study of mediumship for the last 35 years, including I had a buddy who did a A&E biography program on Edgar Cayce. I read all the Edgar Cayce books. She's the closest thing to Edgar Cayce, medically speaking, in terms of her readings, I've ever seen. She goes down to the mitochondrial level. She talks about mixing bad concoctions of medicines that don't go together. She just read a friend of mine and told him that something in an Impossible burger that he'd been eating, he was having an allergic reaction to, and that's why he had the puffiness in his face and around his eyes. I mean, it's off the chart, Brian. She should be in a major university being studied. These 5 doctors she talks to in spirits. I tell a friend of mine's a retired doctor. I said, hey, Rick, I got news for you. What? When you die, you're still a doctor, man. And you're going to be conferring with other doctors. I don't know if you'd be conferring with Carolyn's 5 doctors because maybe they're a little older than you.
So, Bob, I want to ask you, you've talked to mediums or no mediums for, you said 35 years. And
Yeah.
there are medical mediums and there are mediums that speak to the dead, as we call them. Have you seen anybody that has a combination like Carolyn does, where she does both?
In answer to your question specifically, the evidential stuff with her is off the rails, but the medical stuff it should be in a lab. In Brazil, 20% of the doctors are Kardecian doctors. They use mediums to diagnose people.
I didn't know
Okay,
that. Yeah.
because it's socially acceptable.
And so as we're talking, there's different as you said, different forms of mediumship. We talk about evidential mediumship, reaching out to people that have crossed the veil and bringing them through. We're talking about psychic abilities in terms of Carolyn. I know works cold cases, and then medical mediumship. And in the same way as you, the medical mediums that I've known are usually very general. Like there's something wrong with your heart, or there's something in your stomach area, and Carolyn's like, it's this lobe of your lung. It's the left lung, and it's in the
exactly
lower quadrant.
Listen what she did to me one day. I'm getting into my car, and she just says, "Do you get dizzy when you lean far over to the right?" Like, well, I leaned through the driver's side window to get something off the dash of my car,
mm-hmm.
And when I stood up, I was dizzy. And now she's got her 5 doctors, right? And she's going, oh, it's a C3 vertebrae. Oh, this is an old injury. Oh, there's been talk about going to a chiropractor. They're concerned if you were to fall asleep in that position for a prolonged period of time, you could have a stroke. Get an x-ray first. I go get an x-ray and an MRI, bulging disc from a previous automobile accident, C3 vertebrae.
Wow.
Over the phone from Wisconsin. No picture phone, just the sound of my voice. I keep reminding her of the story where she went to go read a family whose matriarch had died. And apparently this mother of this family, where they're all gathered because, a meeting's going to come over and get us in touch with mom. Carolyn walks in the door, and the mom was a real character. So she jumps in front of Carolyn in spirit and goes, here I am. And Carolyn laughs. And they're all sitting there all somber, and the
Mhm.
medium comes in and she's laughing. And she pulls it back. Oh, I'm supposed to be respectful. Oh, this isn't going to look right. May I use your bathroom? She goes into the bathroom. She washes her hands. There's no towels or paper towels. So she says to the mother in spirit, "Can I where are the paper towels?" And she says, "Oh, go out and across to the kitchen. Kitchen's an open area to the living room." And she goes into where the kitchen is, and she just says unconsciously, "Can you turn on the light, please?" And she turns on the light. The light goes on all by itself. Brian, a woman who knows of her calls her because she sees a ghost in her house.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. She calls Carolyn. I saw a ghost. Okay, she calls it pulling. Let me pull it in. Oh, it's the mother of your next door neighbor. She's contemplating suicide. You've got to call your next door neighbor right now. She calls on her landline. Nobody's picking up. Do you have her cell phone number? Yes. I know. I think Carolyn got on the cell phone number, calls her. She's on a bridge, Brian. And Carolyn talks to her and says, "I've got your mother here. You can't do this. The two girls need you. You're estranged from your husband, or you have problems with your husband. You have a lump in your breast. It's not as bad as you think. None of this is as bad as you think. Don't do this." She talks her off the bridge, Brian, with her mother in spirit coming to the rescue. And Carolyn would say over and over and over again, "It's not me. It's spirit." The
Bob,
mother, the girl,
I want to interrupt you for a second because I want to make sure that that was so complicated. I want to make sure people picked up on it. So the mother in spirit went to the next door neighbor
next to the next door neighbor,
who,
because she knew the next door neighbor knows Carolyn.
right.
And so she's freaked out, like, "Oh my God, I got to call Carolyn. I got a ghost in my house." All right, Carolyn, like the motherly type she is. Let me look. Oh, that's the mother of your next door neighbor. You got to call her right now. She's contemplating suicide. She's not picking up. She's not. Do you have her cell phone? Boom.
Yeah.
She's on the bridge, Brian.
Yeah. Yeah. That's incredible.
But that's not the only one. The other day, just last week, a guy calls her, former client, all wigged out, paranoid, driving a truck down the highway. "I'm being followed by a bunch of people. I think they want to kill me." She pulls it in. She realizes that in the state of mind of this driver, they could get in a wreck and be hurt.
Mm-hmm.
So she does her viewing and says, "Okay, you have four cars around you. Am I correct?" "Yes." "You see the burgundy car with the mother driving it and the daughter in the front seat who's texting?" "Yes." "Let that burgundy car go by." And describes the other three cars the same way. And then she says, "Now you got to pull over." "No, no, if I pull over, they'll get me." "Do you trust me?" "They're going to get me." "Do you trust me? I just described all four of those cars to a T." "Yes." "All right, pull over now." And all four cars go on their way. And then she says to the driver, "Now, that was real. All these other things you're perceiving are not real."
Mm.
And that person says, "My God, you've saved my life." The reason the urgency was it wasn't a scheduled reading. It was like, this is an emergency. Something bad is going to happen if this person doesn't slow down.
Mm-hmm.
And they were on the phone for 3 hours.